My name is Neema Avashia. I'm the author of Another Appalachia, Coming Up Queer and Indian in a Mountain Place. I'm so sorry I can't be here with you this evening in person, but as Silas mentioned, I have a new baby who's just in the other room, and it wasn't quite time to leave her yet. I wanted to say thank you to Silas and everyone at Berea for having me involved in this symposium. It's really an honor to be here with you. I'm going to read one essay this evening from my book. This essay is called A Hindu Hillbilly Elegy, and I hope you enjoy it. 1. When I hear the first strains of Om Jai Jagdish Hare, I am instantly 5 years old again and racing around the exterior of the South Charleston Junior Women's Club with my friends. We throw salted peanuts into cups of Coke and scream with joy at the ensuing eruptions of brown foam, only stopping when ordered into the building by our parents for the final stage of the puja, the arti, the moment when light is offered to the deities. Out of breath and sticky-handed, we push our way to the front of the room, where photos and idols cluster on a small table weighed down by offerings of fruit and sweets. Aunties in silken saris hold a flat silver thali decorated with designs made in rice and vermilion powder, upon which small cotton balls dipped in ghee have been lit. One by one, we approach them and take hold of one side of the thali, keeping our eyes on the flames and the idols as we move the thali through the air. First left, then right, then counterclockwise. As each of us finishes, we pass one hand over the flame, then over our heads, a motion ingrained in our muscle memory. Around us, elders clap their hands and sing the arti, full-throated. We are a motley crew, this band of Hindus, gathering once a month to pray in southern West Virginia in the mid-1980s. Our families immigrated to the United States from all over India, sometimes by way of Kenya, Tanzania, or Uganda. Work as engineers or physicians has brought us to this tiny state whose W our parents confuse with V because we don't have a W sound in our home languages. In their mouths, West Virginia often becomes Vest Virginia. We live in a valley nestled by a river whose name we also struggle to pronounce. Kanawha, another W to deal with. In topography wholly unfamiliar to us. The leaves changing color each fall and then drifting to the ground in crunchy piles is a phenomenon that will perpetually fill us with amazement. Our immigration to almost heaven, West Virginia, began in the late 1960s. By 1990, Asians made up 0.4% of the state's 1.7 million person population. Cut that number in half, eliminating the Filipino, Chinese, and Korean communities, and you have the number of South Asians in the state. Cut that number down to Indians of the Hindu faith, and you have less than 2,000 people statewide. A single Christian megachurch in my hometown had as many members in its congregation as our entire faith did in the whole state. Hinduism, in its non-polemicized form, is a loose amalgam of texts, mythologies, philosophies, and rituals. It isn't held together by a pope or a network of clergy. Our priests act as conductors of ritual, not spiritual advisors. In truth, our religion is largely self-directed and individualized, which is fine when you live in a country where many of the other 1 billion inhabitants also practice their faith this way, where there's a temple on every corner, and your religion's holy days are state-sanctioned holidays. Adherence to the faith proved more difficult for me, often the only Hindu in a crowd of Christian classmates. I know this is not just a Neema problem. Nearly every week, I see an article proclaiming the erosion of faith in America. But that erosion, in my case, was both enacted upon me and by me. 2. I heard that people like you worship cows. I was in elementary school the first time somebody hurled that phrase at me, much the same way a bloody cow's head had been hurled at the door of our makeshift temple in the basement of a house once in the late 70s. How does a child explain faith to another child? We don't worship cows, we just think they're sacred. Worship, sacred, to a Christian kid in West Virginia with limited vocabulary, what was the difference? My polytheistic faith was incomprehensible. The blue gods, the ones with elephant heads, the ones whose stories my mother recounted and I hungrily devoured, were mocked by my classmates in the world outside our home. Why don't you eat meat, they would ask, eyeing my fluorescent yellow lemon rice, stained by turmeric and packed in a biohazard Ziploc bag my thrifty father had taken from the chemical plant. The orange skull and crossbones on the front did nothing to ease my outsider status. Hindus don't believe in violence. Killing animals is a form of violence, so we don't eat meat. I gave them the same answers my parents had given me when I asked at our dinner table, but the answers I accepted unquestioningly didn't suffice. What if plants have feelings? What if that carrot is actually screaming when you cut into it? Aren't you committing violence then? Again, I failed to know how to explain. So much of culture and faith had been automated for me, much as they had been for my Christian peers, that I couldn't provide reasoned responses to their questions. It never occurred to me to turn the microscope on them, on their faith, on their culture. Such is the curse of being the minority during childhood, I suppose. It never feels quite safe to challenge dominance in that way. Instead, their shaming questions prick tiny holes in my nascent faith, tapping any reserves built up at home and at puja. 3. My bedtime routine as a child was the same every night. My mom came into my room and patted my back as she sang Gujarati and Sanskrit bhajans to me. I fell asleep each night to the sounds of Raghupati Raghav and Vakratunda Mahakaya, learning the words long before I learned the meanings. When I sought to understand, instead of just parrot, and deliberately asked my mom to translate word for word, pushing her knowledge of Sanskrit beyond its limits, I sometimes found the songs didn't resonate for me. Singing about Gampati's curved trunk, round body, and brilliance of 100 suns didn't fill me with a sense of spirituality. It was my mom's voice that convinced me all was right in the world, not the words that she was singing. I remember wanting desperately to emulate her piety, but failing to understand the source of her devotion. I sang the songs, replicated the rituals, hoping to capture the same holiness I saw on her face when she stood at the altar in our kitchen. Still, no matter how hard I stared at my reflection in the tiny silver idols, I never saw the same look mirrored on my face. But I'd be lying if I told you that I don't sing those bhajans to myself at night when I have trouble sleeping. Or that I don't say a quick Bhagwan Badanu Balu Karjo, Bhagwan Badanu Rakshan Karjo every time I board a plane, asking God to forgive my mistakes and keep me safe. Or that I didn't listen to Raghupati Raghav, Gandhi's favorite hymn, on repeat 6 years ago when my cousin committed suicide at the age of 30, and I inexplicably set up the idols on my altar in front of his picture, lit incense, and sang along. 4. A sampling of conversion attempts by Christians in chronological order. 1986. A neighbor invites me to attend Sunday school with her. I pressure my mom into letting me go, and after a few sessions, find myself at the altar being saved. My mom never lets me go back to Sunday school again. 1992. My middle school basketball coach forces our team to say the Lord's Prayer before every game. Participation is not optional. I can still recite it verbatim today. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Excuse me. 1994. A Mormon high school classmate sends blonde-haired, black-suited missionaries to my house. My parents keep the Book of Mormon that's proffered, unsure of how to turn it down, but politely send the missionaries on their way. 1996. A friend invites me to a Super Bowl party at her church. All goes well until halftime, when the pastor turns off the television and asks for people to bow their heads, then encourages people in the room who are ready to accept Jesus into their hearts to raise their hands. I am the only person in the room who's not already a member of the church. I squeeze my eyes shut tight, keep my head bowed, and count the minutes until halftime is over and the game begins again. And then there is the constant question asked every time our brown-skinned family attends a gathering of white West Virginians. Have you been saved? Have you been saved? Have you been saved? The litany is exhausting. The holes in the fabric of my faith grow larger. I don't seek to patch them up with Christianity. I simply wish I did not have to explain or justify my inherited, out-of-place identity. 5. My favorite family photo depicts 3 Indian couples on an autumn road trip. The men, complete with shocks of thick black hair and patterned bell-bottom pants, the women, with luxurious braids and chanlos painted on their foreheads, stand in front of a log grist mill, the red and orange leaves of West Virginia fall scattered around them. Their children, ranging in age from infancy to 10 years old, squirm on laps and scramble towards the edges of the frame. Each fall, my parents organized a trip to a state park in West Virginia for us and the other West Virginia Gujaratis who became our inherited family. At Pipestem or Hawk's Nest or Blackwater Falls, we hiked through deciduous forest, waded in creek beds, rode horses, and sang Bollywood songs and Hindu bhajans by the light of a campfire. We ate khichdi for dinner and Taze Valley biscuits for breakfast. Through these trips, I grew to love the wild and wonderful aspects of West Virginia, even as I struggled with the religious and racial elements. Its natural beauty settled into my sensory memory right next to the Hindu puja. West Virginia is the only home I know, though it's not a home that always loves me back. The same holds true for many of my peers from the Hindu Hillbilly crew, the rowdy children who played until it was time to go in for puja. While the tug of war between the culture of their homeland and the culture of their new home certainly existed for my parents and their friends, the impact on their identities seemed far less extensive than it was for the Indian American young people of my generation. By the time our parents moved to America, their identity formation was largely complete. Their work, in some senses, was about recreating the sensory experiences and rituals of their past, but they always had their past as a point of reference. For young people in our community, the challenge was different. As adolescents, deep in the throes of identity formation, holding to our parents' religious faith was much harder. We didn't have the same emotional attachment to the rituals, the sensory memory of what those holidays actually felt like, or what it felt like to share them with family. We had modified rituals, simulations of holidays, held in incongruous spaces with fluorescent lighting and shiny linoleum flooring. My mom waxes nostalgic about doing Navratri Garba for all 9 nights growing up in India. I only know the experience of 2 weekend Garbas held in the same middle school gymnasium where I took phys ed from Monday through Friday. If anything, the closest approximation to faith for me might be the omnipresent pull to go home to the mountain state. The way the colors of a West Virginia fall still render me breathless. How the lyrics of John Denver's Country Roads evoke an enormous lump in my throat. It is the hillbilly part of my upbringing that has stayed with me, even as so many of the Hindu elements slowly fall away. I'm going to stop right there. Thank you so much.